You would think by this point, with how far we've gotten into the Megalo box, that we would have already peaked by now with, like, the best episode. For instance, like, say, episode 3 came around, it was the best episode yet, and then the next episode that overtakes episode 3's quality would be the final episode of the series. But that is not the case when it comes to Megalobox. Every single week, every time there is a new episode, it always one-ups itself. It always beats the previous episode in its own way, and this episode is a perfect example of that. It beats all of the previous episodes because of the slow burn that this series has going for it, which, let's get into that. I do not think that this episode would have been as good if it wasn't for the way the writers and the entire team that's working on Megalobox, the way they tackled this series. It wouldn't have worked. Because, see, Mikio as a character, when he was first introduced, he seemed very plain, boring, just a brother-type character, this obstacle that, Joe had to overcome before he fights Yuri. But now seeing this episode and that build-up for him, I am very fascinated about what is going to happen next. How is he going to be taken down? Because, number one, in the last episode, if Joe would have fought the man, it would have just felt like a standard, match. Like, Joe going in, beating the man, moving onward. That was pretty much it. But I like how this series has built up this, behind-the-scenes plot with the company, Shirato, and how it's slowly trying to say that there is a dispute. There's an internal struggle for power going on within, and that is what this episode was really about. Showcasing that Yuki, which is the one that started this entire event with Megalobox, she is now in a dispute with her brother, and the brother's like, I want to prove my worth. I want to prove that I am better at running the company. I have a better, project, better, gear and all of that. And I'm just like, this is a really good way to handle the series. Just the way that it's been built up, slowly building up these little details behind the scene. I mean, did we all expect, Shirato to be that important, like this element of the series that we got in this episode? Honestly, I didn't expect that. So just job well done, Megalobox, for being a fantastic piece of literature. But okay, this episode, I like the line that was said by Yuri in this episode. When an animal latches onto you or bites you, it does not know how to let go. And that meaning is pretty huge and important for Joe as a character, and even Yuri as well, which I will get into. See, Joe, as we know, he has a really unfortunate past, okay? And he is someone that has gotten here thanks to luck, bluffing, and all that. That's how far he has gotten his thanks to that. And he's a stray dog. That is what he is symbolized as throughout the series. And even in the opening song, you see how it's Joe, but as a stray dog. This scarred up, messed up stray dog. And so because of that, you could see how when Yuri was talking to Mikio, like, hey, look, you don't need to underestimate, an animal that bites on you, because they don't let go. He was basically saying, an animal, when they latch on, the only way they're going to let go of you is when they die. And I feel like that has a direct link to the title of the series, or the ending of, the series. Like when we get to the credit sequence, like where it says not dead yet, how it pops up every time the episode ends, and all that. I feel like that's kind of what the correlation between those two scenes are, is that an animal, or a stray, that is savage will not let go until it gets what it wants, or it dies. And that's what Joe has been doing the entire time, pushing forward to achieve what he wants, and the only way he is going to stop is if he hits the ground and can't get back up again. That's pretty much what the entire point of the series has been. So it's hinted at, or implied in this episode, that Yuri's background isn't so black and white, or it's not a background that you would think he would have. Like, you would assume that he probably had a good upbringing or whatever, but that is definitely not the case after what this episode did. With the whole convo that Mikio and him had, it was very apparent that Yuri, at some point in his life, he was an orphan child, someone that probably lived on the streets, someone that didn't have much, and probably Yuki found him and then gave him what he has now, this chance, this opportunity to be what he is. And if I had to assume anything, most likely his origins are very similar to what Joe has as his origin story. For instance, having fixed matches, being a stray dog, someone that, didn't have an identity and had, a fake identity and all that, fake ID. I'm willing to bet that most likely Yuri was in a very similar spot, but he got lucky, and you had it to where Yuki found him and and gave him a chance, and that's where he's at now. But also, I feel like the reason why Yuri even stepped up to try to fight, Joe at the beginning of the series was because he realized that he probably originated from that area. Most likely, if we had to assume anything, maybe Yuri at one point or time in his life, maybe he also used to own that ring. That ring that was in the underworld, maybe he was the king of the ring, and then he gave it up because he now became an official member of society. Maybe that's why he felt at place there when he went there, and maybe the reason why he said, this is now your ring, come fight in my ring now. That could be the correlation there, which I would like it if that's where the series is going. Let's talk about the stuff with Nambu and how he was called a scorpion, or someone that couldn't really get so far. He had a limit. That is what the mob boss, the mafia boss, said to him in this episode. And it also holds a lot of weight for the message of the ending of the episode. See, Nambu, he's had this characterization for a while that shows that he seems like he doesn't care about anyone, like he only cares about himself. That's what even Joe says. He's like, you don't care about me at all, so don't worry. But we know for a fact that's a downright lie. We know that Nambu cares about Joe. Regardless of how he acts or what he says, we know for a fact he cares about Joe at the end of the day. Now, the thing is that everybody calls Nambu a snake, scorpion, or he's this toxic individual. And he even says, like, you're not going to be able to get that far. You can try to make friends, go into a different world or whatever, but you're still going to be the exact same person. And I think the meaning of that scene is that no matter what he does, he has his limits. He cannot cross the limits that he already has as a person. And that moment when he was trying to talk to Yuki about setting up a rematch with Yuri, I think that was the reference there. That was his limits. Even though he's a skilled individual and he knows how to snake around different things and bluff and all of that, he reached the limit he possibly go, his absolute limit. And it was thanks to Joe that came in that saved the day and caused it where he got that rematch that he wanted. So the way you can view this is that you're better with others than you are by yourself. If you have more people around you, you're able to accomplish a lot more. But if you're by yourself, you'll have a limit that you'll hit a lot quicker. And I think that was the message there, showing that Nambu can't do everything by himself. He has to, accept others around him to help him out. He cannot take all the weight upon his shoulders and try to move forward with it. They all need to equally share their burden together. Now, let's get into the match. Mikio and Joe, and how their match is gonna be. So, Mikio, we found out a little bit more about how his fighting style is. His gear that he dons, it has an AI integrated inside of it that is called Ace. And this AI gives him the advantage because it's able to detect movement of gear and predict and counter that gear. So, for instance, if I was wearing gear and I was coming in for a right swing and all that, his gear would detect that and it would block it or counter it, whatever, in whatever way, even attack me. That's kind of what Mikio's gear does. So it's a perfect counter to normal boxers of Megalo boxing. And the thing is Joe, as a boxer, as we know, he's gearless Joe. He does not rely on gear to do any fighting, which is very dangerous, but at the same time, that is a great advantage against Mikio, because his gear relies on detecting the opponent's gear. Now, this doesn't mean that Mikio is going to be an easy opponent, just because Joe manages to work his way around that weakness of his gear. The point is Mikio is obviously a very skilled fighter. There is no way that he has made it this far just on his AI gear alone. He had to get there through sheer willpower and skill. And that is most likely what we're going to be seeing in this upcoming match. It's going to be two fighters that pretty much don't have gear going up against each other. Because, see, Mikio, even if he has his gear on, he's not going to be able to utilize it like he normally would in a regular fight. And so he's pretty much effectively just going to be like an average gear fighter. That's kind of how he's going to be. While Joe is going to be gearless Joe with no gear at all. So they're going to be kind of on even footing. Or at the very least, it's lowering it down to where Joe has somewhat even playing field, because he no longer has to worry about someone predicting his movements. But here is the thing, though, that we do need to consider. Regardless if the AI is integrated or not, or being able to detect Joe, his gear does give him more strength. So he's still going to be hitting a lot harder than Joe. So that problem is still there. It is not gone just like that. So that still needs to be factored into consideration for this upcoming match. I do believe it's going to be very close, and probably one of the hardest fights that Joe has probably ever had. If I had to assume anything though, probably the biggest downfall for Mikio as a fighter, it's probably going to be because he does not consider Joe as worthy of his time. Joe even says that when Mikio looked at him, he was very confident. He was someone that didn't really care about Joe at all. He looked like he was fighting another battle and was looking straight past Joe in the first place. He was looking at his battle with his sister. And that is an incredible weakness. Because, see, if you're viewing your goal off in the distance, which in a lot of ways can help you through certain situations and drive you to do things that you never would normally be capable of, that is a good thing. But at the same time, though, to disregard everything in front of you and just look at everything at the end of the finish line, that is not good. That is not a good way to go about anything, and that can lead to failure, and that's probably what's going to happen to Mikio. Him looking off in the distance at his objective, his goal, and not looking at what is right in front of him is going to cause him to fail. Most likely, Joe is going to beat him because Mikio got overconfident. That is what I really think is going to happen. Now, besides all of that, I think this episode was truly enjoyable. I think many can agree with me that it is one of the best episodes yet of Megalobox, and I cannot wait to see how the next episode is. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below if you enjoyed this week's episode. Did you hate it? Did you like it? Be honest. And how do you feel about the story so far, where it's going? How do you feel about, the Mafia mob boss, how they were helping out, or how he was helping out Nambu and Joe? Let me know your thoughts on him in the comments below as well. I love you guys. You have a wonderful day or not, wherever you live. Please be safe. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. Chibi out.